Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of The Daily. It's Friday, December 2nd, here with Greg Lawless. I'm Nick Fershaw. Greg, we've been waiting for this moment for a long time, and the fans of Montreal definitely have the debut of the Montreal Impact jerseys for their 2012 expansion season in MLS. We saw a lot of the new players, a lot of new faces, new jerseys. What did you think?
Well, they're very blue. Blue and white, joining a lot of other MLS teams actually with the blue and white look. I was expecting a little something, something a little bit more, I don't know, festive or crazy, but they went with a pretty simple and traditional look. Looks good.
There are a lot of those new players, Davy Arnaud, Donovan Ricketts among the guys who debuted him. You can check out all the images on MLSsoccer.com. Moving on, there's some news down in D.C. We talked about Charlie Davies all season, whether or not he's going to come back. He's on that loan from Sochaux. It looks like D.C. United has declined to exercise the option for him. They could go back to the table and re-sign him to a new loan. What do you think is going to happen to Charlie Davies?
This is a good one. It's a good question about what's going to happen because we don't really know where Sochaux is in terms of Charlie Davies. There is I've heard some rumors about some other clubs in Europe that are maybe interested in bringing him in as well. Sochaux still on his contract. There's certainly the option available to DC perhaps for another loan year in DC. But I think that DC looked at it from the second half of the season and wondered, they didn't really get the production that they wanted out of him. So can he produce again the way he did in the beginning of the year? Can he produce for a full season next year? That's what I think DC United and Ben Olsen are right now weighing.
He certainly looked good in a handful of games, but maybe a little bit too expensive to buy that option for Charlie Davies. There's news out west as well. The San Jose Earthquakes continue to overhaul that roster after a disappointing season last year. They've traded for Alexandre, the guy who debuted 2 years ago for Real Salt Lake, but really broke through this season, saw a lot of time. What do you make of the deal?
Yeah, well, this is a good move, I think, for San Jose, mainly because Alexandre came into the league. He was an attacking midfielder in college. He went to Lynn University, a small Division II school, and basically in Salt Lake, because he's behind Javier Morales, and then actually Colin Warner, also with Salt Lake, took some time up at attacking midfielder. Jean-Alexandre, because of his size and a little bit of his strength, was brought back more as a holding midfielder. For the most part, he had to sit behind Kyle Beckerman in that situation, so he really didn't have a chance to play as much as I think he felt he should, and maybe even the way Salt Lake felt he should. He's moving to San Jose. Earthquakes obviously trying to revamp things as much as possible. Don't forget, Bobby Convey is on the way out. We've already seen Shea Salinas brought in by them. Late in the season, we saw Ryan Johnson move to Toronto, things like that. They're shaking things up at the Earthquakes, and I think they need to. Alexandre may be a guy who could come in and be an attacking midfielder for them.
One guy that's not going anywhere, that's Bobby Boswell, a Houston Dynamo defender who helped the Dynamo reach the MLS Cup. We saw him left on that re-entry draft list. Thought that maybe his time in Houston was done. Not at all. They've re-signed him. It's a big signing for them.
Well, I think when that re-entry list came out, there were a lot of gasps of like, oh my gosh, Bobby Boswell. And they said, didn't they protect him when it came to the expansion draft? And yes, they did. This was a contract thing. President Chris Canetti actually came out with a tweet saying, hold your horses, everybody. Boswell's not going anywhere. And a day later, we hear, yes, he signed a new contract with Houston. This is, as we talked about him before, Jeff Cameron's sidekick. And remember we had that whole brouhaha about that word? Look, Bobby Boswell played very well for Houston down the stretch. He and Cameron make a very good pair in the middle of their defense.
And one other bit of news from Texas, it's looking like Maicon Santos, the FC Dallas playmaker, potentially on his way out after FC Dallas acquired him via trade from Toronto last season. Greg, let's take a look abroad. Some American internationals doing very well in the Europa League, especially Aguche and who's had that reborn year, so to speak, with Sporting in Portugal. Sporting Lisbon moving on.
Yeah, a 2-0 victory in group stage against FC Zurich. This is great for Gooch to continue to raise his profile for one thing, but also to continue to get his form. I mean, he's looking very good since he's moved to Portugal. Also, Schalke moving through a 2-1 victory over Steaua Bucharest. That means Jermaine Jones will be into the knockout stages. And Sasha Kljestan at Anderlecht had a very good game playing for them. They were in Athens to play AEK, and they got a 2-1 victory in Greece. They were already through, so it didn't really matter in this case, but he showed very well for Anderlecht.
Well, you can get all the news on Americans abroad right here on MLSsoccer.com. And don't forget, the latest edition of Extra Time Radio is up from Thursday. We spoke to Arlo White, the new voice of soccer on NBC, as well as Bill Hamid, Greg, the DC United goalkeeper, talking about his latest birthday party, his 21st.
He's 21st, and it was an aspirational birthday party. The cake was pretty shiny, let's say.
Some big aspirations from that cake. You can find that on iTunes and Buzzsprout. And for all the latest headlines in MLS and U.S. soccer, log on to MLSsoccer.com.